Welcome to Bird Podcast. I'm Shobha Narayan. We are going all over India in this episode. In birding, the concept of a big ear is straightforward. How many different bird species can you see and record in 1 year? This is typically done within a geographical region, usually a country. You pick Australia, South Africa, or China, travel around for a year, and record the number of birds that you see. Big ear birding is huge in North America. It is in fact the subject of books and a movie called The Big Ear. Ken Kaufman wrote a book about his big ear. In India, so far only one birder, Shashank Dalvi, has completed a big ear. He is the subject of this episode. How do you do it? I asked. If someone wanted to do a big ear in India, where would you go? Where would you start, and how would you do things?
India is a huge country. It has like borders with 7 other countries as well. So it has 5 different biogeographic zones, and in these five zones, there are multiple species which are unique to these 5 places. So the biggest task in the big year is to get to these 5 different locations and 5 different zones and try and maximize your birding depending on season, because you have to be at the right place and right time of the year just to make your effort count.
Shashank is of medium height, medium build, with a preoccupied air of a professor, which he isn't. He is a child of nature, constantly breaking off conversations to point out the sound of a Tickle's blue flycatcher male, babblers, woodpeckers, bulbuls, and the like. He grew up in Mumbai, and this is where he began his big year with a forest owlet.
This bird was lost to science for about 113 years, and then it was rediscovered by Ben King and Pamela Rasmussen from northern Maharashtra.
Tanza Wildlife Sanctuary, where Shashank began his big year, was about 450 kilometers away from the Shahada region, where Pamela Rasmussen, Ben King, and David Abbott rediscovered the forest owlet after 113 years. Tanza, that's spelled Tansa, was just 90 kilometers, about an hour and a half outside Mumbai. Home to barking deer and leopards, it also hosted, intriguingly, the forest owlet.
Luckily, a friend of mine went to this Tansa Wildlife Sanctuary in the outskirts of Mumbai, and he managed to click a picture of a bird, which then he could not identify. And then we all realized it was a forest owlet. So I thought, why wait for sunrise of 1st of January? And we started birding at 2 o'clock in the morning. And before the sunrise of, I would say, 1st of Jan, we had seen about 4 species of owls. And after sunrise, because this forest owlet and jungle owlet are diurnal species, so we managed to see those birds in the early January itself.
Doing a big year isn't easy. Shashank had tried once in 2010 without success. He then moved to Bangalore for a master's degree at the National Center for Biological Sciences, NCBS. This was where he met his wife, Vishnupriya, an ecologist. He decided to do it again for 2015, planned and plotted for a year, all through 2014. He found himself on 1st January in Tanza.
That place is an excellent place for not only just forest owlet, but Indian subcontinent endemic mottled owl. You also get brown hawk owl, you get spotted owlets, you get Indian scops owl, and a brown fish owl, and so on and so forth. So it's definitely a good place to start birding.
Shashank had a plan. He was going to chase after the more difficult target species first. He began with a trip to Western India, the Greater and Lesser Rann of Kutch, followed by January in Kashmir, then Delhi, then Uttarakhand. Rann means salty desert, and that's what this is. Miles and miles of white salty earth. But the amount of bird species on this dead land is simply stunning. There are Indian cursors, floricans, common cranes, and one bird that Shashank had been wanting to see when he flew to Gujarat in the border of Pakistan.
There is a bird called as Hypocoleus, which is if you want to see that bird in India, then you have to get to a small village of Phule, which is at the outskirts of Greater Rann of Kutch. And trick to see this bird is you have to get to its roosting spot and get there before sunrise, because as soon as the bird wants to leave its roost, it comes out, feeds on Salvadora persica fruits, and then it takes off in vastness of Kutch. So once the bird takes off, then it's impossible to see the bird during the daytime. Then you have to wait for the same place when it comes back to roost, and that time the sightings can be really brief. So if you want to see this bird in a good view, then you have to get there before sunrise. So that one was quite good. Then there is a Sykes' nightjar. There is a Greater Hoopoe. I also come across a beautiful site where beautiful as well as sad, I would say, because we came across a site where there were thousands of abandoned nests of lesser flamingos, and that happened because the water level had dropped down and water disappeared, and flamingos had no other option but to leave these eggs. And there we were in an open vastness of Little Rann of Kutch with not a single adult bird, but thousands of abandoned nests.
Yeah, you showed us a slide and it was like little pearls all across the field. It was just so amazing and sad. So okay, from Greater Rann of Kutch, you moved to Little Rann of Kutch.
Yeah, so this sighting was at Little Rann of Kutch.
Okay.
And after that, I went to Kashmir.
Okay.
Kashmir was to find a bird called as orange bullfinch, and it's like that's probably the only colorful bird you might see in white and gray colors of Kashmir in the month of January. So I had planned quite well for this bird because two of my friends had seen this bird in 2 consecutive winters in exactly the same area, outskirts of Srinagar. And interesting thing was they had seen the bird on 21st of Jan and 16th of Jan on previous years. But so this bird usually breeds in higher up in mountains, and when it snows higher up, it comes down. So in the outskirts of Srinagar. So you have to time your trip in such a way that there is snow around. So when I landed there on 26th of January. So my idea was because it had snowed previously about around mid January. By the time I will be there will be snow everywhere. But the year when I landed, it had snowed higher up in elevation, but there was literally snow around Srinagar. So when I went and looked for orange bullfinch, there was no orange bullfinch there. So of course I dipped on the bird, but at the same time I got to see some really good birds which are good birds for India. Like for example, there is jackdaws. Saw about a flock of 5,000 jackdaws in one go. There was a sighting of Kashmir Nathach, which is a very range restricted species again. So overall, it was still a good trip, but without the main target species,
which is orange.
Yes. So you get some, you miss some.
Yeah.
And this is one bird I had to again attempt for it in the month of August.
Shashank didn't see the orange bullfinch in Kashmir, but he managed to get himself locked out of his car and have other adventures. After that, it was onward to Delhi. Delhi is actually a great spot for birding in India. Statistically speaking, it is second amongst urban capitals for the largest number of birds in the outskirts. It ranks number 2 after Nairobi in Kenya. Delhi has numerous birding spots like Sultanpur, Okla, Delhi Ridge, and other locations.
So after Delhi, I went to Uttarakhand for it was a bird festival there where I was presenting on warblers. So I actually gave a presentation on how to identify leaf warblers in India, and especially to Uttarakhand specific leaf warblers. And after there I got to see lots of good birds as well, like lesser fish eagle, and some of the western Himalayan foothill birds, because that's the time when they come down in winter.
Crossed by the Himalayas, cradled by the river Ganga, and made famous by the Beatles, Uttarakhand is a paradise for birders, mostly because of its strategic location. No matter what time of year you go, you can see summer migrants, winter migrants, passage migrants, altitudinal migrants, and local migrants. Indeed, some say that you can see half of India's 1200 bird species in this single state.
There will be black-chinned babbler. Then there will be Sassarcus burki, that is now a green crown warbler. There will be lots of there will be rosy minivet, which is otherwise a difficult bird to see in India in winter. There would be, so there are lots of easy birds as well, like plum-based water red start. So this is a place where you get some of the difficult birds along with lots of common birds as well. So
after that, it was onward to the land that is the dream of every birder in India, the great Northeast.
It was a very targeted trip. So there are three areas which are targeted on that trip. One was Manipur. Second one was Meghalaya, where I birded around Cherrapunji. Then I went to Namdafa, that is the easternmost part of Arunachal Pradesh.
Now, you have spoken a lot about how you love the Northeast, Shashank. Tell us about it. Why is the Northeast so special to you?
Northeast is not only just a quality of species or quantity of species, but quality as well. Because lots of these birds, about India's 2/3 bird species are found in Northeast India. But when it comes to just sheer quantity, like starting from tragopans or wedge-billed babblers, beautiful nuthatches, hornbills, white-billed heron, and I can go on and on for a long time for lot many species. Like for example, India's I think 80% of India's babblers are found in 87% of India's babblers are found in Northeast India. So you can imagine the kind of species richness this place has. And it's still remote. Some of the areas of Arunachal Pradesh are still not explored, and a lot to be discovered from these places anyway. So that's a place where Bougainvillea cicla was described by Ramana Atreya, where we found Per Alstrom, and I found Himalayan forest thrush, and there are lots of species which are still hiding in plain sight, maybe. So.
And during your big year, what was the Northeast like? What did you see?
So what I did in Northeast, I made 3 different trips. First trip was just to go after difficult species and difficult to reach areas. Second trip was trip to go and see as many species possible with lots of backups places. And the third thing was to go there and clean up the rest of the species. So at the end of the year.
Okay. So the first time you went, what happened?
So first time I went, I birded. I first went to Manipur, where we birded in Loktak Lake, and in Loktak Lake there was the target species were some of the grassland endemics of, or I would say endemic and near endemics of Northeast India. We did get to see black-breasted parrotbill, Jerdon's bush chat, slenderbill babbler, Indian grassbird, and these are the birds which are actually usually difficult to find elsewhere. So that was quite good. And then we visited a small town at the border of India and Myanmar called as More, where we got to see Chinese francolin. And Loktak Lake was also special for not only just birds, but also a deer called as Bro Antler deer, or also called the dancing deer of Manipur. So Manipur was an excellent place to visit anyway. And after that, I made a short dash, literally a 12-hour, or I would say 12-hour trip to Meghalaya. And the idea was to look for this tiny endemic wren babbler called as tawny-breasted wren babbler. So we went there, and on the way to Cherrapunji, we had to look for this bird in small patch of forest. And I would say small patch of forest because that patch was literally surrounded by coal mines from all sides. This bird is actually losing habitat, and it's happening really fast. So it's a grave concern that this bird is actually facing many challenges in future when it comes to conservation. So Meghalaya was quite good because we also got to see Darkram the swift, which is also a very range restricted species which breeds in certain areas. And Cherrapunji waterfalls are one of the best places to see this bird in month of March onwards, February, March onwards. So we did get to see Darkram swifts as well. And after that, I went to Namdafa. Namdafa is still a wild place. It's about 2,000 square kilometer of forest, and idea was to look for this big bird called as white-bellied heron. If you want to see this bird in India, this is the only place where you can see it. It's much easier to see it in Bhutan, but Bhutan was not part of my big year, so I had to concentrate mainly on white-bellied heron in Namdafa, which involves like about 3 days of walk to get there. And along with that there are several other birds as well. There is snowy throated babbler, which is again known only from Namdafa and nowhere else in the world. I guess there's a small population in northern Myanmar, but those areas are in fact even out of reach for most of the birders. But again, Namdafa is good for other species as well, like streak wren babbler, brown hornbill. There is rufous-throated fulveta, which are found elsewhere, but much more easier in Namdafa than anywhere else. So these are the difficult birds I wanted to target in Namdafa trip, which I did. So which was quite nice.
In bird watching, there's this concept called twitching. The main goal of twitching is to accumulate species on one's bird lists. So what you do is birders sort of fly to one location just to see a bird. They fly long distances. When there is a sighting, they sort of gather together. And this is called twitching.
In my big year, I decided a few things. I decided not to twitch birds, and I decided if I will try and see as many birds possible in one go. So I did not take a single flight to twitch a bird. I took lots of flights, but it wasn't a targeted birding thing. And Sundarbans technically has only one or two species which are unique to that landscape. Which are buffy fish owl, and Goratharan is still a difficult bird to see, or almost impossible bird. So I didn't want to twitch birds during my big year. So I didn't go to Sundarbans for that reason.
So now we are at March, is it? So you finished Namdafa and the Northeast, then what happened?
By March 9th, I think I was at 477 species of birds, which is one third of India's birds. And the reason why the numbers were still going slow, because I was going after difficult species and not after the numbers. So that was the reason why in the initial months, the birding was still on the slower pace.
And I have to ask, so you didn't do the Bharatpur waterfowl migrants bit also?
Not in that bit, not in first couple of months.
Okay. So after March 9th, so you flew from the Northeast. Where did you go next?
I came back to finally reached Bangalore.
Okay.
So, in fact, funny thing was I reached Bangalore, but didn't even go home, and I stayed in North Bangalore at my institute. And the next day morning, I went birding straight from institute itself.
So this is a National Center of Biological Sciences.
Yes.
Okay. And what did you see in Bangalore?
So Bangalore actually gave me lots of easy and common species, along with some of the difficult ones as well. Pied thrush at Nandi Hill was really special because that's one bird which is if I miss out on this bird in winter, then I have to go back to Western Himalayas in breeding time to see this bird in its remote locations. So that way, this actually helped.
Shashank's in-laws teach at the Valley School in Bangalore, and he ended up birding there as well.
My in-laws' place in Bangalore has brilliant birding anyway. Any given day, you can see spur fowls, jungle fowls, barbets, Indian blue robin, cinerea states, and lots of other common birds. So I caught up with those birds as well.
Okay. And it's in your in-laws' place in Bangalore that we are sitting right now and hearing so many species outside the window.
Yeah. It's like any given time you can get about 20 to 25 species from a bedroom window.
And so how long were you in Bangalore?
I guess I was in Bangalore for about 3 days or 4 days.
Okay.
Boarded in and around Valley School. and then I made a small short stop at Chennai for about 4 hours. Got white wing turn there, and from there I straight went to Andaman and Nicobars.
Yes. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands is sort of virgin territory for a number of birding experiments. Last year, for example, Bird Count India reported that a team of researchers loosely affiliated with the Andaman and Nicobar Islands environmental team trained local birding enthusiasts to sort of become birding guides themselves. These were local folks who were taught how to identify birds, explain birds, and take tourists to different locations in this wondrous islands of
I'd been to
Andaman and
Andamans
Nicobar.
before, and I found birding was really easy. So within no time, I could clean up most of my Andaman birds. Andaman and Nicobar Island groups has lot of endemics. These are the birds I'm not going to find anywhere else other than these two island groups. So it was quite nice because birding in a way was predictable. I could go to the same places. In fact, if I remember it correctly, Andaman's Corpse Owl and Mangrove Whistlers, these are two birds which I saw them on exactly same trees. So that was quite great.
Andaman and Nicobar are a tiny strip of islands. They lie on a straight line between Chennai and Thailand. Getting to Port Blair, the capital, is hard, but the birding makes it also worthwhile.
So lots of owls there, serpent eagles, shamas, and it's one place where I would say it's the only place in India other than Trans Himalayas, or maybe in some parts of Trans Himalayas also there might be some babblers. But Andaman Nicobar is one of those places in India where not a single babbler species is there. And that is because they never colonized these islands. They could never reach to these offshore islands because babblers are weak flyers. This is something which I actually kind of worked for my master's thesis in WCS NCBS course.
By the time he finished Bangalore and the Andamans, Shashank was at 652 species, comfortably at the halfway point.
So after Andamans, I went to Nicobars, and Nicobars had lots of great birds as well, and some rare endemics. In fact, I went and looked for. I got Great Nicobar crake, which is still an undescribed species to science. And when Vishnu, my wife, and I saw the bird, we were the only second and third people ever in the world to see that bird in the wild. So, which was quite nice.
What is special about this crake?
So Great Nicobar crake is known to science by only a couple of photos. Till then it was known only by a couple of photos. And I guess a couple of more photos turned up later on. But I think till date, there have only been 5 or 6 sightings of that bird ever. And luckily, Vishnu and I found a place which turned out to be a good place because that's a place where people went again and saw the bird. So before that, it was, I think, when it was found for the first time, it was known only by one picture and a couple of pictures. And the person took a picture, and he went back, and then he realized it was a new species of science. So when we went to Nicobars, that was one of the main target species. It took us about 4 days to find the bird, but it was all worth it because we had to trek for about 8 or 9 kilometers.
Here's the thing with birders though. The birds that they think of as super special may seem quite ordinary to amateurs. Take the crake for instance. How is the Great Nicobar crake different from the Andaman crake?
It's a forest-dwelling crake, just like Andaman crake from Andamans. Similar to Andaman crake, I would say. Not much is known about this bird. So we know from all pictures and Vishnu and my observations that this bird is definitely a ground dwelling during daytime, and it might be roosting on trees, or I wouldn't say trees, but like in a lower canopy during nights. Because there are a couple of pictures of this bird which turned up afterwards are from roosting bird from tree.
Okay. So after this, where did you go?
After Andamans and Nicobars, went back. I went back to Northeast because that's the time when month of April and May and early June is a time when lots of birds are breeding in Northeast India, and Northeast is a huge area to cover. So I targeted about 4 or 5 locations in Northeast. In fact, there's a place called a Sela Pass, which is the highest elevation in Northeast India where one can bird. It's about 4,200 meters, and I went there in April and again in June. So to cover two sets of birds because the lots of Himalayan birds shows elevational movement, and by going there in 2 different months in April and June, you actually have a go at different sets of birds and at the high elevations. Because otherwise, you are not going to get to these high elevations in any time again in the year. So that was quite good. And I
Was that where you went up the hill and came down and up the hill?
No, that was in Kashmir later on.
Okay. And Sela Pass, why did you go to Sela Pass?
Because Sela Pass had some great birds. If you go there in the month of April, you get to see solitary snipe, which you can't see it again in June. So, but in June, it's a relatively easy birding for, let's say, lots of bush warblers and other things which are not there in the month of April. Like Myzornis is much more easier in Sela Pass in month of June than in the month, let's say, month of April. There are lots of other birds as well which I got to see. Like for example, I saw grandalas. Solitary snipe was really special because that's one bird which winters, which in winter known only from Sela Pass and other areas where it's easier. It's known from many places as well, but Sela Pass probably is the best place in India to see this bird in wild. But that for that sometimes you may have to wade through water at about 3,800 meters, which is ice cold, but it's always a fun.
Okay, and then Mega Northeast. After that, then what happened?
So after that, I went to Eagle Nest Wildlife Sanctuary, where I had worked previously for 7-8 years. So where I was quite familiar with the birds there. I followed that trip with a trip to Nagaland in mid elevations, in Wolong and Mishmi Hills. The reason behind that was quite simple because all these places are mid elevations places, and every place has about 4 or 5 target species. But along with those target species, there are lots of common species as well. So let's say if you miss one bird in Eagle Nest, you can always have a backup of that bird in Mishmi Hills or in Nagaland or in Wolong. So you have to put extra effort to see the difficult ones and get them, but at the same time you have a lot of other opportunities as well for birding.
So by extra effort, do you mean getting up at a certain time or going to a certain place? What?
Yes, you have to get up sometime before sunrise, drive up to places where in fact I remember one of my driver called me Shaitan Birder as well because I make them get up way early in the morning.
3 a.m.
Sometimes, yes.
So you mopped up quite a lot in your second trip to the Northeast.
Yes. So, in fact, within the first 2 visits, like Eagle Nest and Sela Pass, my bird count had risen to 822 species. And by the time I finished Northeast trip, because by then you get to see many birds, and by the time I finished my trip in June, I was on 884 species of birds, which is about 2/3 of India's bird species. So within a span of 50 days, I could cover about 1/3 of India's bird species which were new for me then that year.
So then did you relax? After all, you've covered 2/3. So what did you do after that?
After that, I came back to Bangalore, and I think I was here for about a week or so. And then I went to the Trans Himalayas because that's one area which I hadn't been before ever. So I knew there lots of lifers lined up for me in that landscape. So I went to Himachal in high elevations of Chitkul, followed it up with Ladakh and the easternmost Ladakh and central Ladakh as well, which actually gave lots and lots of new birds for me as a lifer as well as for my big ear. So Himachal was quite good. I got to see lots of Kokolas pheasants at Jalori Pass, Horson's blue robin in Chitkul. In fact, that wasn't a new year bird, but it was still a great sighting because when it winters in Northeast, it's usually a very shy bird. So it's good to get that bird during the breeding season when it's quite bold, when it sits out in the open. So that was quite good. Lots of ruby throats lammergeiers, and lots of good birds as well. But Ladakh was even brilliant because that's one area of Trans Himalayas I never visited before. So it was like a lifer's galore. I think in that trip, if I remember it correctly, between Himachal and Ladakh, I got about 45 species of lifers, which I hadn't seen before.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot because I had covered most of India, but not this bit. So that was quite nice.
And in Ladakh, what did you see?
Tibetan lark was quite good because if you want to see Tibetan lark, then you have to get to a small village of Hanle, which is on easternmost part of Ladakh, and that's the only place where this bird is distributed within Indian limits. It has a much wider distribution in Tibetan Plateau in China, but it's still a good bird to get within Indian limits. So that was quite nice. Also, there was Mongolian finch, which was nice. There was Himalayan snowcogs, white-browed tit warbler was quite nice. Again, it's a localized bird, so all those birds were quite good.
And do you want to elaborate on any of these birds?
So on the way back from Ladakh to Kashmir, I made a stop. I made an extra effort to look for long-billed bush warbler, and long-billed bush warbler is one bird which was last seen breeding in India in 1977. So to go and look for this bird involved lots of research in terms of you have to go through books, figure out where the last time the bird was seen, and figure out what could be the right habitat. And it took me about 6 hours to find that bird after reaching a small village of Sanko and 40 kilometers drive because every time I could find a suitable habitat, which used to be on a steep mountain slope. And the reason behind that is that area is heavily overgrazed by cattle. So to find a habitat on a steep slope was always a pain because you get off from the vehicle, carry your camera, climb up to this place, look for the bird. If you don't find it, come back to the road, drive again to find a next suitable habitat, stop again, climb up on steep slopes, and repeat this exercise till you find a bird. So finally, there was a time when I got the bird. It was so tiring that I had left my camera behind. So because every time to lug your camera up at 3,600 meters wasn't a fun. So it took a lot of time and a lot of effort. So I didn't get a picture of long-billed bush warbler, but I did get to see this bird twice. And funnily enough, I think that was the time the birds had already stopped singing. So I think these birds had finished breeding much higher up in elevation. I think they breed much higher up than Sanko Valley, and they just come down in elevation when it comes down. And I think by chance, I got them on passage in the month of I think it was early August, it was early August. So I think I just by nick of time I got these birds, and because say some of my friends went there in the month of July and next year, and they did not get the bird in the same area. So I think the bird must be definitely breeding higher up in elevation, and August could be the right time of the year to look for this bird again. So
okay. One other piece of jargon. There's a word you will hear called split, and this means that when a single bird species becomes split into two different bird species, which is good for a birder because then your bird count has just increased by one. After Ladakh, the Trans-Himalayas and Kashmir, Shashank flew to Bangalore and went straight to the Western Ghats.
Western Ghats also, just like Andaman and Nicobar, has lots of endemics. But I've delayed my trip to Western Ghats till now, just because I knew I can still go in the monsoon. The birding is difficult. These endemic birds are not going to go anywhere. So you just have to find a time when it's least rainy. And from Bangalore, all these areas are easily accessible. So it's not a difficult trip to make. So that's what I did. I visited 4 distinct locations in Western Ghats. And that's where I actually tried to look for the birds which are not only known, but also I put extra effort to bird species which are not yet split, which are known by subspecies, and I kind of knew that there will be future split. So I covered those birds in month of August and September, and then later on I could sit at home and enjoy the splits. That's what happened with some of the birds there.
And what were these birds?
So in Western Ghats there are earlier there were 3 laughing thrushes which are known to science. Wayanad laughing thrush and grey-breasted laughing thrush and Nilgiri laughing thrush, and among which Wayanad laughing thrush is found in lower elevations. Nilgiri and grey-breasted laughing thrush were each known by two distinct subspecies, and all these subspecies are located uh, in distinct geographical zones. So, for example, if you take example of grey-breasted laughing thrush, it has two distinct populations. It had two distinct populations. One was near Munnar and other areas, so which is between Palghat Gap and south of Palghat Gap and north of Shenkota Gap. And then there was another distinct subspecies which is found only south of Shenkota Gap. So I put an effort to see both these populations, and as we are in 2017, both these populations got split into two distinct species now. Also, in south of Shenkota place, there was another population of white-bellied blue robin, which is now called as Sholakili and or Sholakili, and that population is now described as a distinct species. So, by covering these areas, I got two additional birds which were not listed in 2015, but as we are in 2017, these are two distinct species which I can count for my big year.
Okay. So you saw the resident endemic birds, and then where did you go next after the Western Ghats?
So by then I had seen more than 1,000 species of birds, and after that I made a trip to northwest of India, and that was in month of September, and the idea was to look for these passage migrants, and there is a funny story behind it because. When I was supposed to go to Northwest, a friend of mine said, "Oh, you just come down to Pune and we'll just drive in my BMW and we'll just zoom past all these areas, cover lots of these passage migrants in one go." And I said, like, sounds perfect. So I landed in Mumbai, and he said, like, just before I could land in Mumbai, he fractured his leg, and he was out of action for some time. So I had to make some phone calls, get hold of some of my other friends, and he said, like, one of my friends said, "Oh, he volunteered by saying that basically he called up at his office, told at his office that he has got dengue, and
Took leave.
he took a leave, and then we took his Passion Pro bike, and we drove north. In the sense, we actually drove from Mumbai to Rajasthan on bike, which is a 100cc bike, not even like a comfortable bike.
That's like 5,000 kilometers almost.
Yes, so we did about 5,000 kilometers on that bike for one, and we covered 5,000 kilometers, I think, in a span of, I guess, some 1 week or so. 1 week or slightly more, maybe about 8 days.
Could you sit after that?
No, so it took about a couple of days of realizing that it's impossible to sit on that bike. So the first thing I did was, after reaching Jodhpur, I drove that bike straight to a local mattress seller, and I gave him 25 rupees, and he said, "Okay, give me as much cotton possible." And he gave me a bunch of cotton. I shoved that cotton into a plastic bag. I still kept that plastic bag and cotton at my house, and I stuffed it in, made a pillow out of it, and put that pillow on a bike, and that's the only way I could sit on that bike for the rest of the trip. But it was all worth it because the trip to northwest India in the month of September is very important, because there are about 7-8 species of passage migrants which pass through this area in the month of September. And if you miss out on the timing by 1 week here and there, you miss out on all these birds. So there's a greater white-throat, spotted flycatcher, rufous-tailed scrub robin, red-backed shrikes, and etc. And these are the birds which you can't see anywhere in India other than these 2 weeks in September. So it was very crucial to hit these birds in the right time of the year. So we got those birds, and on the way back we made a small halt at Mount Abu to look for green Navadavat, another bird which is facing quite a bit of conservation challenges. And right now in the country, that's the only place where one can go and see that bird. So but we still managed to get that bird after a lot of effort. It was quite nice.
There is one type of birding that is not so common in India, and that is pelagic birding. Pelagic refers to birds that thrive in open water. The word means open seas in Greek. Until 2010, pelagic birding was relatively rare in India. In 2011, Dr. S. Subramanya published a first-person account of pelagic birds in the journal Indian Birds. In this, he talks about 3 species, terns, shearwaters, and skuas, who are often and affectionately called the thugs or rascals or pirates of the high seas, because they hound these helpless terns into giving up the fish that they've just captured, or in some cases, even disgorging the contents of their stomach. Shashank went on a pelagic birding trip in September.
I would say it has taken the bounds and leaps compared to what it was pre 2010. But from 2010, a couple of my friends, Praveen J and Deepu, they actually made a special effort to find how to find these pelagic birds in India from West Coast. And now we know the best time to visit them, to see these birds, is in month of monsoon months. The problem is in monsoon months the sea is very rough. So either you have to make a trip before May, during May, or post monsoon, and which is kind of challenging because you have to hope that the birds are still around in the month of September and they haven't gone back, and get these birds just in time. So I managed to do a couple of pelagic trips to see these birds. One was from Kerala and one was from Karnataka, and which was quite nice because it's like I got to see John and Spectral, which turned out to be only second record for that bird for Karnataka. Also got to see streak shearwater, which was I think probably the only sighting of that bird in that season from India. And few other birds as well, about 10 to 11 pelagic bird species.
There's a cute slide in Shashank's PowerPoint presentation that he made recently to the Bangalore International Center. The slide talks about the number of kilometers he has covered, the number of flights he's taken, the number of close calls he'd had, and the one accident that he experienced. This was after his pelagic birding trip. It was while he was rafting in Rishikesh. The instructor told him that it was a safe place to jump, and so jump he did, and hit concrete. Long story short, Shashank had to be rushed to the hospital, given local anesthesia, and 5 pieces of concrete were pulled out from his leg.
So, but that wasn't bad at all, because what was bad was what doctor said after that. Because he said, you're out of action for next 21 days. And I said, like, this is not happening during my big year. So I had to cut short my trip and miss out on some of my Western Himalayan bird on that trip. And then I came back to Mumbai and waited for about 9 days. And then I went on for my third Northeast trip of the year. So in that trip, I've covered Kaziranga, South Assam Hills, Diring Wildlife Sanctuary. And again, it was targeted trip because I had already made 2 trips to Northeast, and idea was to get this was a cleanup trip, so try for those 9-10 species of birds which are left for the year. And
did you manage them? Did you manage to get them?
Yeah, I managed to get all of them. Also because I had already lost time because of my injury, and it was then slog over, as you say in cricket match. So you have to get to those birds in the last few days. And because of my injury, I had to change my plans a lot. So I had to cut short my Northeast trip. So I was actually running short of time to see those 9 or 10 species of birds. So a friend of mine and I did, we actually adapted a strategy. What we used to do, we used to travel in the public transport from one place to other place. And in Northeast, I have so many friends, like people, like Dr. Asimville had his own car. He drove us around to some other places. And in other places, wherever we went, we used to travel overnight, get to a place in the morning. And I have friends everywhere in Northeast. So I borrowed their bikes. And then we used to bird for a whole day, come back and again travel in place B overnight, and so on and so forth. So we actually saved up on time and we maximized on the birding in that trip. So one of the main target on that trip was to look for Van Haslet sunbird, which I had seen from Indian limits only once before, and that was in the month of, I think, February. So in 2015 itself. So I went to this place, and it was quite challenging because I had to walk for about 11 kilometers, and my leg wound wasn't healed. So it took a while. That trek involved wading through water and slush, and we went when we reached to this place where a friend of mine had seen this bird in month of February, and we waited there for about 45 minutes, and bird didn't show up. So my friend and other people in the trek, they went back, and another friend of mine and I waited there for slightly longer. So we thought we'll wait for 10 minutes and join them. Then these 10 minutes became 20, 20 to 30 and 40 and so on. And finally we gave up. We walked about 10, 20 meters, and then we heard this unfamiliar sunbird song, and we realized, oh, this could be the bird. So we went back to that same spot, and Van Hassel sunbird pair was right there.
Wow.
So it took a while, but it was quite nice to see that bird.
Huh. Okay. India has 537 wildlife sanctuaries. Frankly, I hadn't heard of the one that Shashank visited next, which was Dering Wildlife Sanctuary in Assam. This is host to 150 species of birds. Its habitat is riverine plains, and it includes endangered birds like the Bengal florican, the white-winged wood duck, as well as a number of grassland-dependent birds such as the swamp francolin, Jordan's babbler, black-breasted parrotbill, and others. Shashank was after the swamp prinia, which, as it turns out, isn't a prinia after all.
Which is, now we know genetically it's not a prinia but a babbler. But it was quite nice. That one took a while because that was I think 2015 was the only year where the bird had been seen after a gap of 4 or 5 years. So that was quite good bird to get for during that trip. And I also made it a point to visit Doyang Reservoir to see Amur falcons, because that's one place which is a rare success stories of conservation when it comes to birds from Northeast India. So that was that was obviously, and we had put up a lot of effort. Bano, Ramki, Roku, and myself, when we discovered this Amur massacre in 2012. So we had put up a lot of effort to for conservation of these birds. So it was fitting to visit Doyang Reservoir to see these birds.
Shashank is at the tail end of his trip and has started multitasking, which for him means bringing his family on birding trips.
3,000 meters in Himalayas, in Western Himalayas, in Chopta. So that was a kind of birding which was happening during last few days. So Western Himalayan birding was quite good. I caught up with my lost birds during my anniversary trip to Western Himalayas, and followed that trip with my family members to Northwest. So we went to Punjab, Harike in Punjab, followed by Jorbid in Rajasthan, went Desert National Park one more time. And the reason behind that was that could be the only way I could spend time with my family during my big year. So again, the birds were amazing. I wanted to show my family members getting in bustard. We saw 2 of them on that trip. We also saw Rufus Vented Prinia in Harike, which was quite rare, along with pendulanteds, Chetty's warbler, and other things. And Rajasthan trip was quite special because of spotted creeper, which is again another localized bird in northwest India. And also one of the highlights was to look for these spotted and black-bellied sandgrouses. So spotted sandgrouses were rarely reported from India before 2015. The last, I think there were some pictures in 2012, and before that there were pictures from 2007. But no one really knew how to find them. So I had to literally ask some of the local birders, and also ask local shopkeepers and hotel owners, because the migratory birds like spotted sandgrouse are called as gatta in Rajasthani, and the very when I asked them where I can find gatta, the first question they asked, "Do you want to eat them?" I said like, "No, I want to see them because that's what my that's what I'm trying to do."
But
And
that's a very telling question. So they were eaten in Rajasthan?
yes, they were eaten in Rajasthan then. So, so my hotel owner immediately called up a hunter and he said, "Oh, you have to get to a place called as Netsi. It's a small village 7 kilometers from Ramgarh where you can see these birds." So I said like, okay, this sounds like good information to look where I can go and look for this bird. And then I went to another shopkeeper because I wanted to buy bread and butter for next day's travel. And the first thing, and I asked him, okay, if I want to see gatta. The first thing he again asked, do you want to eat it? So I said like, no, I want to see the bird. So he called up another hunter and that hunter also said, you have to get to this place called as Netsi. So I knew the Netsi is a happening place if I want to see this bird. So next day morning, before sunrise, we drove to this place, parked ourselves at that Netsi village pond. And maybe about 2.5 hours wait, these birds finally turned up. And I'm happy to say that even though these birds were getting hunted before 2015, a dynamic forest officer which got posted in that landscape, Govind Sagar Bharadwaj, managed to stop hunting completely of these birds. So nowadays these birds are not hunted at all. So which is quite nice.
Yeah.
So that's one of the success stories.
Of conservation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what happened?
And then I continued my trip to across north. Basically, I finished my trip in northwest and took a straight flight from there to my second trip to Andaman and Nicobars. Because by then I had seen about 1109 species of birds, and the only way I could get more birds was get to these islands. Because on my first trip to Nicobars, I could not visit Central Nicobars, and Central Nicobar and Southern Nicobar has two different sets of endemic birds. And I had in my previous trip, even though I had attempted a lot for Nicobar megapod, I hadn't seen the bird. So it took a while to get to Nicobars, but because it's to get to Nicobar is always a logistical challenge. There are there's certain ferry schedules which are not reliable. There's only helicopter which has only two passengers which can get to Great Nicobars. So that was kind of a bit of a challenging, but it was all worth it because finally I did manage to get Nicobar megapod eventually. In fact, on my previous trip, Vishnu and I had walked 23 kilometers and we located about four odd Nicobar megapod nests, and none of the nests were active. So it took a while, and it was quite kind of disappointing not to see that bird on first trip. But in second trip, it was completely easy. We did get to see megapod there. We also got to see Nicobar bulbuls, Central Nicobar serpent eagle. We got a second record of two-barred leaf warbler for India, Blythe's paradise flycatcher, Japanese sparrowhawk, and so on and so forth. Which was quite nice.
And was this the trip where Vishnu made that famous comment, I won't see the bird even if I see it?
No, that was on the previous trip.
Okay.
When we had walked for 23 kilometers without seeing a bird. So,
okay. And then, so we are at the tail end. Now, where did you go next?
so it was, I think, 26th of January. 26th of December, when I was in Port Blair looking for long tour stint and a redneck stint. And I saw a redneck stint at 8 o'clock in the morning. And same day I took a flight to Ahmedabad. Landed in Ahmedabad at 7 o'clock. And by, I think 8:30 in the night, I was looking for Eurasian scops owl there, which I didn't get on that night. So I could just hear the bird. But it was still a travel of 12 and a half hours to, I think, between 2,600 kilometers. But that's how big air birding is. And this is like end of the year, so you have to put in extra effort to see some of the birds. That's what happened. I made another trip to LRK to look for pallid scops owl, Barbary falcon. Even though that time the Barbary falcon was a distinct species, now it's lumped with the peregrine falcon. So I gained few species during my big year and lost some of them. So this was lost, not some of them, only one as of now. So this is one of the birds which I lost during my big year, but it was quite nice. And last 2 days of my big year, I spent birding in Jamnagar to look for common ring plover. Like I think every European might laugh at me because of common ring plover, but common ring plover is actually a difficult bird to see in India. It winters in localized areas in Western India and Kerala, and it took 1.5 days search, but I did not see the bird. And finally, just when there's a half an hour left for sunset, finally we located one individual, uh, and that was the end of the big year. So it's quite exciting.
What are your feelings and learnings from your big year, Shashank?
Uh, I would say when it's come to certain birds, you should never give up. You should always keep on trying for that bird till you get it. That's so the more effort you put in, the more rewards you get eventually. So that was, and you need to have. I would say it actually made me realize how important my family members are as well, because even though they are not traveling with you everywhere, they are constantly supporting you. So that was actually quite nice.
Would you do it again?
I won't do my big year again because the reason why I did my big year, the main reason was completely different. It was mainly to realize or get a idea about or snapshot of what's happening with the bird across country in one calendar year. So that means I wanted to know, because eventually I want to set up a conservation program which will concentrate on birds in India, across India, outside protected areas, and for that I wanted to know what's happening with the birds in one given time frame, because that's the kind of a baseline data which I can use later on. And because when you go to northeast, the conservation challenges are completely different compared to what's happening in Ladakh, what's happening in Western Ghats and other places. So that way the big year was a bit of a learning curve as well, which I really wanted to do. And so the main reason behind that was to uh, learn more about birds, and that's eventually happened. So
After our conversation, Shashank and his beautiful wife Vishnupriya took me birding. Vishnu's parents are teachers at the Valley School and live on campus. It's like a forest. Within a few yards, we'd seen about 10 species of birds, including one of my favorites, the greater kukul. They offered me some nice buttermilk, chas or sambaram, and then I had a drink and left them to their lunch. Rather late lunch, I must say.
what blew my mind was sheer landscape of India, from cold deserts of Ladakh to hot deserts of Rajasthan to pristine islands of Andaman and Nicobars, northeast India where everything is so rich, to endemism of Western Ghats, and it was just amazing.
Shashank's big year is pretty amazing too. Thank you for listening to Bird Podcast. I'm Shobha Narayan. Thanks to Shashank Dalvi and Vishnupriya for talking to me. And the podcast is produced by Ullaz Anand and Echo Audio. See you next time.